I'm Jerome, 29 years old, and I never thought my sister's wedding would become breaking news. But there I was, watching my TV at midnight as footage of Richard slapping Natalie played on repeat. The same family, who told me I'd make things awkward at the wedding, now frantically called my phone. The irony burned worse than the whiskey in my hand. If you're watching this from a complicated family situation, hit like and subscribe. My story will show you when to stand up for loved ones, even if they don't want you to. Growing up, Natalie and I were inseparable. 3 years apart in age, I took my role as big brother seriously. I taught her how to ride a bike in our suburban driveway, the summer she turned 6. I still remember her determined face, cheeks flushed pink with effort, as I ran alongside holding the seat until she finally found her balance. "Don't let go, Jerome," she'd yell. But when I did, she kept pedaling, too focused on moving forward to realize she was doing it all on her own. When Natalie started middle school, some girls targeted her for her braces and secondhand clothes. I was 15 then, already in high school, but I'd wait for her after school and walk her home, making sure those girls kept their distance. We'd stop for ice cream some days, and she'd tell me about her classes, her dreams of becoming a veterinarian someday. Those afternoons, with chocolate smeared on her braces and her eyes bright with ambition, are some of my favorite memories. Our parents worked long hours at their respective jobs. Mom was a nurse who often pulled double shifts, and Dad ran his own construction business that frequently kept him away on weekends. This left Natalie and me to look after each other. I'd help her with homework. She'd make us peanut butter sandwiches, and we'd watch movies together on Friday nights when other kids our age were at football games or mall hangouts. Things began to change when I left for college. I chose a school 4 hours away, pursuing computer science while Natalie was still in high school. My visits home became less frequent, as coursework demanded more time. Phone calls replaced our movie nights. I'd still check in, but something was shifting. Looking back, I realized that's when the gap between us first appeared small at first, just a crack in the foundation of our relationship. When our parents' marriage fell apart, that crack became a chasm. I was 22, had just graduated college, and landed my first IT job at a startup. Natalie was 19, and in her sophomore year of college, studying biology with her veterinary dreams still intact. The divorce was ugly in the way that long marriages ending often are decades of resentments, suddenly unleashed, accusations thrown across dinner tables, and children forced to choose sides. Mom discovered Dad had been having an affair with a woman from his office for nearly 2 years. When confronted, Dad didn't deny it, but instead launched into a litany of complaints about their marriage, how Mom was always working, how she never made time for him. I found this deeply unfair. Mom had worked those extra shifts to put me through college without debt, something Dad had been unwilling to contribute to. I stood firmly with Mom, helping her find an apartment, moving her things when Dad wasn't home to avoid confrontations. Natalie, though, had a different reaction. She was always Daddy's little girl, and she couldn't reconcile the father she adored with the man who'd betrayed our mother. Instead of facing this contradiction, she chose denial. She accepted Dad's version of events, that the marriage had been dead for years, that both parties were equally to blame, that his relationship with his coworker had only started after an emotional separation. When I challenged these narratives, Natalie accused me of trying to turn her against Dad. "You've always been jealous of our relationship," she said during one particularly heated argument. Words like that leave scars. I tried maintaining our connection despite our disagreements. I'd text her funny memes, mail care packages to her dorm, invite her to visit me in the city where I'd moved for work. Sometimes she'd respond warmly, other times with cold formality, and occasionally not at all. It was during this strained period that Richard entered the picture. Natalie brought him to a family dinner 2 years ago. I remember it clearly. It was at Mom's apartment, a peace offering of sorts, as Mom was trying to rebuild her relationship with Natalie. Richard was 33 at the time, almost a decade older than Natalie. He arrived in an expensive car, wearing a designer watch that he made sure everyone noticed. and brought an ostentatious bouquet for Mom. Something about him immediately set off warning bells in my mind. It wasn't just the age difference, or his obvious wealth, which he referred to casually throughout dinner. It was how he interacted with Natalie. He'd place his hand on the back of her neck when she spoke, almost like a handler guiding a performer. Twice he interrupted her stories to correct details she'd gotten wrong. When she reached for a second dinner roll, he raised his eyebrows just slightly, and she withdrew her hand as if burned. At one point, Natalie's phone chimed with a text. Before she could check it, Richard picked up her phone, read the message, and responded before setting it down again. Natalie didn't react. This was apparently normal. When I went to the kitchen to help Mom with dessert, I mentioned what I'd observed. "You're overreacting," Mom said. "He's successful and clearly cares about her." "Your sister seems happy." Dad was equally impressed. After dinner, he pulled me aside and said, "Richard's going places. He's already got his own investment firm at his age. Natalie's lucky to have found someone so established." I bit my tongue. Neither of my parents seemed concerned about the red flags that were so obvious to me. Maybe I was being overprotective, I thought. Until Natalie's birthday party 3 months later. The celebration was at an upscale restaurant Richard had selected. About 20 people attended, family, some of Natalie's college friends, and several of Richard's business associates. Throughout the evening, I noticed Richard spending a lot of time chatting with a woman I didn't recognize. Their body language was too familiar. His hand lingering on her lower back, her leaning in to whisper in his ear, both laughing intimately. When Natalie was occupied opening gifts, I approached Richard at the bar. "Who's your friend?" I asked casually, nodding toward the woman who was now chatting with one of his colleagues. Richard's charming smile didn't reach his eyes. "A business associate." "Why do you ask? Just seemed like you two were pretty close." His expression hardened. "What exactly are you implying, Jerome?" "Nothing," I said. "Just looking out for my sister." Richard leaned in, his voice low but cutting. "Let's be clear. Your sister has finally found someone who can give her the life she deserves, unlike your father who cheated on your mother, or you who abandoned her for college, and then tried to turn her against her own father. If anyone's hurting Natalie, it's you and your jealousy." I was stunned by the personal attack. Before I could respond, Richard called over Natalie, put his arm around her waist possessively, and loudly announced, "Your brother thinks I'm flirting with Gabriella. Isn't that ridiculous, sweetheart?" Natalie looked mortified, then angry at me, not him. "Why would you say that?" she hissed. "You always do this, Jerome. You can't just be happy for me." That night marked a turning point. Natalie began declining my invitations to meet up. My calls went to voicemail. When we did interact at family gatherings, it was strained and superficial. Richard had successfully driven a wedge between us, and I had played right into his hands with my confrontation. Over the next year, I watched from a distance as my vibrant, independent sister transformed into someone I barely recognized. Natalie, who once wore bright colors and quirky vintage clothes that expressed her personality, now dressed exclusively in the muted, expensive outfits Richard approved of. Her social media, once filled with photos of her with friends, animal shelter volunteering, and outdoor adventures, became a carefully curated display of her relationship with Richard, fancy restaurants, exclusive events, and posed vacation photos where her smile never quite reached her eyes. When I did see Natalie at family gatherings, she was noticeably thinner. She had always been naturally athletic with a healthy build, but now her collarbones protruded sharply, and her face had lost its characteristic roundness. Once, I overheard Richard comment on her dessert choice at a family dinner. "Are you sure you want that, babe? Remember that dress we bought for the charity gala next month?" Natalie put down her fork immediately, her momentary enjoyment extinguished. Her once active social life had dwindled dramatically. Sophia, who had been Natalie's best friend since high school, confided in me that Natalie had canceled plans last minute at least 10 times in the past few months. "She always has an excuse. Richard surprised her with dinner reservations, or she needs to attend one of his work functions." Or she's just too tired. When we do hang out, she's constantly checking her phone, like she's afraid of missing his texts. Even more concerning was how Natalie had abandoned her career goals. After graduating with her biology degree, she had secured an entry position at a respected veterinary practice, with plans to apply to veterinary school. 6 months into her relationship with Richard, she quit the job, explaining that the hours were too demanding, and she wanted to focus on supporting Richard's career. She took a part-time administrative role at his investment firm instead, completely under his supervision. After witnessing these changes, I couldn't stay silent any longer. I tried reaching out to Natalie multiple times, suggesting lunch or coffee, just the two of us. She always had a reason why she couldn't make it. When I directly expressed concerns via text, her responses were defensive and clearly scripted. Richard just wants what's best for me. He's helping me become more sophisticated and focused on what really matters. Desperate for allies, I reached out to Sophia one afternoon. We met at a coffee shop far from Richard's office, almost like we were having a clandestine meeting. Sophia looked nervous the entire time, glancing at the door whenever it opened. "I'm worried too," she admitted, stirring her untouched latte. Last month, we finally managed to have a girls' night out. Richard called her 17 times in 4 hours. 17. By the end of the night, she was so anxious she was physically ill. "Has she said anything to you?" I asked. "About how he treats her when they're alone?" Sophia hesitated. "Not directly, but there was one night when she'd had a few drinks. She made a comment about how Richard gets scary when she disappoints him. When I pressed her on what that meant, she clammed up completely, said she was exaggerating, and switched topics. "Have you tried talking to her about it?" "Once," Sophia said. "She accused me of being jealous of her relationship and said I was trying to sabotage her happiness. We didn't speak for 3 weeks after that. I'm afraid if I push too hard, she'll cut me off completely, and then she'll have no one." I understood Sophia's fear all too well. Still, I tried reaching out to my parents, hoping they might have more influence. The conversations went exactly as I feared. Mom, who had initially been skeptical of Richard, had been won over by his charm and the lavish gifts he occasionally sent her way. Every couple has adjustment periods, Jerome. Richard is teaching Natalie about a world we couldn't provide for her. Of course there are going to be changes. Dad was even worse. The boy's a financial genius. Do you know what kind of returns he got for me on that investment I made through his firm? Natalie's set for life with him. So what if he's a little old-fashioned about some things? That's how successful men are. I was hitting walls everywhere I turned. Then, one rainy Tuesday night around 11, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, there stood Natalie, soaking wet, mascara streaking down her face. For a moment, my heart leapt. Maybe she was finally ready to talk, to acknowledge the problems in her relationship. I ushered her inside, handed her a towel and dry clothes, made her tea. She sat at my kitchen counter, looking small and fragile in my oversized sweatshirt. That's when I noticed the bruises, 4 distinct fingerprint marks on her upper arm, already turning a deep purple. "What happened?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm while rage built inside me. "It's nothing," she said quickly. "We had an argument about the wedding planning. I wanted to invite some of my college friends that Richard doesn't know." He grabbed my arm to emphasize his point. He didn't mean to grab so hard. "Natalie, that's not." "Don't, Jerome." She cut me off. "I didn't come here for a lecture. I just needed somewhere to go for a few hours until he calms down. He gets so stressed with work, and the wedding is adding more pressure. I tried a different approach. Stay here tonight. We can talk more in the morning." She shook her head. "He'll be looking for me soon. I turned off my phone location, but he'll figure it out eventually. I just need you to promise you won't say anything about this to anyone, especially not to Mom and Dad." "I can't promise that," I said gently. I'm worried about you. This isn't healthy. Nat, her expression hardened. This is exactly why I hesitated to come here. You always overreact. Richard loves me. We're getting married. Every relationship has rough patches. Before I could respond, she was already gathering her things. I'm going to call an Uber. Please, Jerome, don't make this bigger than it is. I watched helplessly as she left, feeling like I'd failed her again. 20 minutes after she departed, my phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. Stay out of our business if you know what's good for you and your sister. I knew immediately it was from Richard. That text was the final confirmation I needed. My sister wasn't just in an unhealthy relationship, she was in danger. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Richard's office building in the financial district. I had no clear plan, just a burning need to confront him about the bruises on Natalie's arm and the threatening text. I sat in the lobby for nearly an hour before his receptionist finally allowed me to see him, likely just to stop me from loitering. Richard's corner office screamed success floor-to-ceiling windows, awards displayed prominently, a desk that probably cost more than my car. He greeted me with a politician's smile, all charm and warmth for the benefit of his assistant who had shown me in. Jerome. What a surprise. Emily. Hold my calls for 15 minutes, would you? Family matter. His voice was pleasant, but his eyes were cold as he closed the door behind her. The moment we were alone, his demeanor changed completely. He leaned against his desk, arms crossed. You've got some nerve coming to my workplace. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I saw the bruises on Natalie's arm last night. Accidents happen, he said dismissively. Natalie and I have already discussed it. She understands I've been under tremendous pressure lately. Is that why you threatened me via text afterward? Richard laughed, a hollow sound. That wasn't a threat. That was friendly advice. Your sister and I are building a life together, and your constant interference is upsetting her. I had my phone in my pocket, recording our conversation. Not legal evidence, perhaps, but I wanted proof of how he spoke when no one else was around. Let me be very clear, I said. If I ever see another mark on my sister, I will go to the police. Richard's facade cracked slightly, a flash of anger crossing his features before he regained control. He straightened up, adjusting his expensive tie. Let me be equally clear. I have connections in this city you can't imagine. One word from me, and your little IT career is finished. I know about the cannabis delivery service you used in college. I know about the traffic ticket you tried to contest last year. I can make things very difficult for you. My blood ran cold at the realization he'd been investigating me. Are you threatening me now? I'm explaining reality, he said smoothly. Natalie chose me. Your parents approve of me. The only person causing problems in this family is you. Back off, or you'll regret it. As I left his office, shaken but with the recording secured on my phone, I felt certain I had to show Natalie what kind of man she was planning to marry. I drove straight to her workplace, the administrative office at Richard's firm, where she now worked part-time. I found her at her desk in the reception area, looking tired. When she saw me, her expression cycled through surprise, happiness, and then guarded caution. What are you doing here? She asked, glancing around nervously. We need to talk. Somewhere private. I can't just leave, Jerome. Richard has meetings all afternoon and needs me to... It's about Richard, I said, lowering my voice. Please, Natalie. 10 minutes. Reluctantly, she led me to a small break room that was currently empty. I showed her my phone, played the recording of my conversation with Richard. I expected shock, anger on her behalf, perhaps tears. What I didn't expect was her fury directed at me. You recorded him without permission? You went to his office and ambushed him? Her voice rose with each question. What is wrong with you, Jerome? Did you not hear what he said? How he threatened me? How he dismissed hurting you? I heard him responding to you, cornering him at work and making accusations. She was nearly shouting now. God, Jerome, you never stop. You've hated Richard from day one, because you can't stand that I'm happy. You've been trying to control my life ever since Mom and Dad split up. That's not true, I protested. I'm worried about you. The way he isolates you, criticizes you, monitors your every move. That's called being in a committed relationship, she snapped. Something you wouldn't understand with your string of 3-month girlfriends. Richard and I are getting married in 4 months. I was going to ask you to be there, to try to make peace, but clearly, that's impossible. The words hit like a physical blow. You're still going to marry him after everything? Yes, Jerome. And you're not invited to the wedding. I can't trust you not to make a scene or try to ruin my day. She stood up, gathering her belongings. Please leave now, before security has to escort you out. I left, devastated. On the drive home, my phone rang. It was Mom. Natalie had already called her. What were you thinking? Mom demanded without preamble. Going to Richard's workplace, threatening him, recording him without consent. I tried to explain, told her about the bruises, the text, Richard's threats. She wasn't hearing it. Natalie explained everything. She said she bumped her arm moving furniture, and Richard was just protecting their privacy when he texted you. You're making mountains out of molehills because you can't accept your sister's choices. Over the next few days, the family fallout was swift and comprehensive. Dad called to tell me I was being ridiculous and needed to apologize to both Natalie and Richard. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins sent messages expressing their disappointment in my behavior. Even family members I rarely spoke with seemed to have opinions on how I had always been too controlling or never wanted Natalie to be happy. The only person who reached out in support was my cousin Marcus, who was closer to Natalie's age but had always gotten along well with both of us. I believe you, he texted. Richard gives me the creeps, too. The way he constantly checks Natalie's phone when she's not looking? Not normal. But the family's gone all in on him because of his money and status. They don't want to see the truth. Marcus became my sole ally and information source in the family, as everyone else essentially excommunicated me. Through him, I learned that wedding planning was proceeding at a rapid pace, with Richard making most of the decisions, and Natalie growing increasingly quiet and withdrawn. She's lost more weight, Marcus reported after a family dinner I wasn't invited to. And she flinches whenever anyone raises their voice or moves too quickly around her. Mom and Dad are either blind or in denial. I felt completely helpless. Every attempt to help my sister had only pushed her further away and strengthened Richard's control. The more I tried to intervene, the more I confirmed his narrative that I was the problem. All I could do now was wait and hope that somehow Natalie would see the truth before it was too late. 3 months later, elegant, cream-colored wedding invitations arrived at family members' homes across the city. I learned this from Marcus, who called me immediately after receiving his. Did you get one? He asked. No, I replied, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. Even though Natalie had told me I wasn't invited, some small part of me had hoped she would change her mind, that our lifelong bond would ultimately matter more than her 4-year relationship with Richard. Marcus sighed. I figured. The invitation is super fancy. Engraved lettering, ribbon, the works. Clearly expensive. It's at the Grand Ballroom downtown. 300 guests. 300? Natalie doesn't even know 300 people. Richard does. Business associates, clients, social connections. From what I hear, the guest list is about 70% his people, 30% family, and Natalie's friends. That detail bothered me deeply. Natalie had always said she wanted a small, intimate wedding, maybe even outdoors with a few close friends and family. This sounded like a networking event disguised as a wedding. I tried calling Natalie throughout the week, but my calls went straight to voicemail. Texts remained unread. I even emailed her work address, only to receive an automated response that she was on leave until after the wedding. Every avenue of communication was blocked. The silence hurt more than arguments would have. This was my little sister, the same girl who had crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, who had cheered the loudest at my high school graduation, who had helped me move into my first apartment. Now I was a stranger, an unwelcome intrusion in her new life. 10 days before the wedding, my mother called. I answered immediately, hoping for news about Natalie. "Jerome," she began, her voice formal in a way it rarely was with me. "I'm calling about the wedding." My heart leapt. "Has Natalie reconsidered? Does she want me there?" There was a pause. "No, Jerome. Actually, I'm calling to make sure you understand that you shouldn't attempt to attend the ceremony or reception. Security will have your name and photo." The words landed like a punch to the gut. "Security? Mom, I'm her brother. Not some criminal. This is exactly the attitude that concerns us," she replied. "You've consistently disrespected Natalie's choices and her relationship. She deserves to have her wedding day without worrying about you causing a scene or confronting Richard." "I would never ruin her wedding," I protested. "I just want to be there for my sister. If you truly want what's best for Natalie, you'll respect her wishes and stay away." Mom's tone left no room for argument. "Let your sister have her day, Jerome. Please." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. Security guards with my photo? My own mother calling to warn me off? It felt surreal, like I'd stumbled into someone else's life story. The next day, my father called with essentially the same message, though his approach was more direct. "Listen, son," he said gruffly. "I know you think you're protecting Natalie, but you're just making things difficult for everyone. Richard's family is very prominent, and this wedding is important for his business relationships. If you show up and create problems, you're not just disappointing your sister, you're affecting my relationship with her too. So, this is about maintaining connections with Richard's wealthy family?" I asked, unable to hide my bitterness. Dad's voice hardened. "This is about respecting boundaries. If you can't do that, then maybe we need to reconsider our relationship too." The threat was clear. Choose between continuing this crusade against Richard or maintaining ties with my family. It was an impossible choice, made all the more painful by the fact that I was trying to protect them, not hurt them. Over the next week, the pressure intensified. Aunts called to reason with me. Family friends reached out to say how disappointed they were in my behavior. Even my grandmother, who had always been my staunch supporter, sent a card asking me to make peace for the family's sake. The isolation was overwhelming. I found myself questioning my own perceptions and judgments. Had I misinterpreted Richard's behavior? Was I really just jealous of Natalie's relationship, as everyone suggested? Was I the problem? In my confusion and loneliness, I turned to the two people I knew I could trust: my girlfriend Samantha and my best friend Daniel. Samantha came over one evening after work, listening patiently as I poured out the whole saga. When I finished, she took my hand. "I believe you saw what you saw," she said. "But Jerome, you can't force Natalie to leave him. She has to make that choice herself." "So I'm just supposed to watch her marry this abusive jerk?" Samantha sighed. "Unfortunately, yes. Sometimes the hardest part of loving someone is respecting their autonomy, even when they're making mistakes. All you can do is make sure she knows you'll be there when she needs you." Daniel's perspective was similar when we met for drinks the next night. "I've seen this before with my cousin," he said. "The more her family pushed her to leave her controlling boyfriend, the more she dug in her heels. It wasn't until everyone backed off that she finally saw him clearly." "But what if something happens to her?" I asked. "What if the verbal abuse becomes physical? What if he hurts her badly?" "Then you'll be there to help her pick up the pieces," Daniel said. "But right now, every time you try to intervene, you're just giving Richard more ammunition to isolate her." As much as I hated to admit it, they were right. My efforts to protect Natalie had backfired spectacularly, driving her further into Richard's control and away from everyone who truly cared about her. With a heavy heart, I made the decision to stay away from the wedding, not because my family had threatened me, not because I was afraid of confrontation, but because it was the only way to leave the door open for Natalie to come back when she was ready. The night before the wedding, I received a text from Marcus. Rehearsal dinner was tense. Richard micromanaging everything. Natalie barely spoke. Sophia looked worried, sick. "I'll keep you posted tomorrow." I thanked him, then turned off my phone, unable to bear any more updates until it was all over. The day of Natalie's wedding, I woke up feeling hollow. While 300 guests prepared to celebrate my sister's special day, I was alone in my apartment, explicitly uninvited from one of the most significant events of her life. I declined invitations from friends who wanted to distract me. This wasn't a day I could pretend to enjoy anything. Instead, I cleaned my apartment, meticulously scrubbing floors, organizing closets, anything to keep my hands busy and mind occupied. Occasionally, I'd check my phone for updates from Marcus, who sent brief messages throughout the day. "Ceremony starting soon. Natalie looks beautiful but terrified." Vows exchanged. Richard added a line about Natalie promising to defer to his wisdom in matters of disagreement. Creepy. Reception underway. Richard hasn't left Natalie's side, even during bathroom breaks. Her smile hasn't reached her eyes once. Each message twisted the knife deeper. I should have been there not to cause a scene, but to support my sister, to be a familiar face in what sounded increasingly like a business function rather than a celebration of love. As evening fell, I found myself staring at social media, watching distant relatives and family friends post photos from the reception. They all showed the same carefully choreographed scenes: Natalie in an elaborate gown that didn't look like her style at all, Richard in an expensive tuxedo, both posing with various groups of guests. In every photo, his hand gripped her waist possessively, and her smile appeared frozen in place. Sophia had posted just one picture with a generic "Congratulations to the happy couple" caption. But what struck me was her expression in the photo, standing beside Natalie. Her eyes reflected concern rather than joy. Around 10 that night, I turned on the local news, seeking distraction. Instead, I found myself staring at footage of the grand ballroom, the same venue where Natalie's reception was taking place. The headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen made my blood run cold. "Disturbing incident at high-profile wedding." Before the reporter could elaborate, my phone rang. Marcus calling. "Are you watching the news?" he asked, his voice shaking. "It's everywhere, Jerome. Social media, local stations, everything." "What happened?" I demanded, although the sickening feeling in my stomach told me I already knew. "Richard hit Natalie, in front of everyone. It's on video." My legs gave out, and I sank onto the couch. "Tell me." Marcus took a shuddering breath. They were doing toasts. Natalie was nervous, laughing a little too much. She accidentally bumped Richard's arm while he was drinking champagne. Some spilled on his tuxedo, not much, just a few drops. But his face. "Jerome, I've never seen someone change so fast." He looked at her with such hatred, said something I couldn't hear, and when she tried to apologize and dab at his jacket, he slapped her across the face, hard enough that she stumbled backward. "Oh God," I whispered. "Is she okay? Where is she now?" "That's why I'm calling. Nobody knows. There was chaos after it happened." Richard tried to play it off as a misunderstanding, but 300 people saw it. Sophia went after Natalie when she ran out, but came back saying she couldn't find her. Richard left about 30 minutes later. The venue called it off, sent everyone home. I was already grabbing my keys. "I need to find her." "Wait," Marcus said. "Before you go anywhere, you should see what's happening online." Someone uploaded the video from their phone. It's going viral, Jerome. News sites are picking it up. They're identifying Richard by name because of his business profile. The family is in full damage control mode. Sure enough, when I checked my phone, I had 23 missed calls from family members who hadn't spoken to me in months. Texts from my parents, asking where Natalie might have gone. Voicemails from aunts and uncles who had previously condemned my concerns about Richard. I called my mother back first. "Have you found her?" I asked without preamble. "Jerome." She sounded like she'd been crying. "No one can reach her. Her phone is going straight to voicemail. I warned all of you," I couldn't help saying. "I told you he was abusive. This isn't the time for I told you so's." Mom snapped. Then her voice broke. "Please, if she contacts you, tell her. Tell her we're sorry. We should have listened." After promising to let them know if I heard from Natalie, I hung up and turned on the TV again. The news was now showing the actual footage, grainy cell phone video that clearly captured Richard's hand, striking Natalie's face, her shocked expression as she stumbled backward, the gasps from the crowd. The reporter was discussing domestic violence statistics and how abusers often hide their behavior until they feel their partner is trapped. Too late. The world was seeing what I'd tried to warn my family about for 2 years. My phone rang again. This time it was Sophia. "I found her," she said without greeting. "She's at the Parkview Hotel downtown, room 418. She doesn't want to see anyone, but I think she needs you, Jerome. She's not okay." "I'm on my way," I said, already heading for the door. "Be careful," Sophia warned. "Richard's been calling the front desk non-stop. That's why I'm not still with her. She was afraid he'd follow me. I told the hotel staff not to confirm she's staying there, but who knows how long that will hold." As I drove downtown, my phone continued to light up with calls and texts from family members, but I ignored them all. The only person who mattered right now was Natalie. Everything else, the vindication, the family's sudden change of heart, the public exposure of Richard's true nature, was secondary. The media presence outside the hotel confirmed that word had gotten out about Natalie's location. A small crowd of reporters with cameras stood near the entrance. I parked a block away and used the side entrance, keeping my head down as I made my way to the elevators. When I reached the 4th floor, I hesitated outside room 418, suddenly uncertain. What if Natalie didn't want to see me? What if my presence just made things worse? But I couldn't walk away. Not again. I knocked, softly. "Natalie?" "It's Jerome." "Sophia told me where to find you." Silence. "I know you probably don't want to see anyone right now, and that's okay. I can just sit out here in the hallway all night, if that's what you need." More silence. Then a rustle of movement. The chain lock slid back, but the door remained closed. "I don't want to talk about what happened," came Natalie's voice, barely audible through the door. "We don't have to talk about anything you don't want to," I promised. "I'm just here to make sure you're safe." After what felt like an eternity, the door opened just enough for me to see my sister's face, her makeup streaked with tears, a red mark still visible on her cheek where Richard had struck her. She was still wearing her wedding dress, now rumpled and stained with tears. "Everyone saw," she whispered, her voice hollow. "Everyone knows." I nodded. "Can I come in?" She stepped back, allowing me to enter the room. The wedding dress's train dragged behind her like a burden as she moved to sit on the edge of the bed. The room was in disarray, her veil thrown in one corner, shoes kicked off haphazardly, mini bar bottles emptied on the desk. I sat beside her, careful to leave space between us. For several minutes, we just sat in silence. Then, without warning, Natalie leaned against my shoulder and began to sob deep, wrenching cries that seemed to come from somewhere primal and wounded. I put my arm around her, holding her while years of pretense and denial collapsed. "I should have listened to you," she finally said, her voice raw. "You saw it from the beginning. It's not your fault," I told her firmly. "Richard is a master manipulator. He isolated you, made you doubt yourself, turned everyone against anyone who questioned him. That's what abusers do. Natalie pulled away slightly, wiping her tears. It wasn't just the slap tonight, Jerome. That was just the first time he did it in public. My heart sank as the confirmation of my worst fears settled over me. How long? I asked quietly. It started with grabbing, pushing things he could always say were accidents. The first real hit was 6 months ago. I was going to call off the engagement, but... She trailed off, looking away. But what, Nat? She looked so ashamed I could barely stand it. He threatened to release private photos of me to my workplace, to the family. He said he'd destroy my credit, that no one would believe me over him. And I was afraid he was right. Everyone thought he was so perfect. The anger I'd been suppressing threatened to overwhelm me. We need to call the police, Natalie. Press charges. She shook her head violently. No police. Not tonight. I can't handle more people, more questions. I just need to get through tonight. I shoved her. I wanted to argue, but remembered what Samantha and Daniel had said about respecting Natalie's choices. Okay. No police tonight. But you're not going back to him. Promise me that much. I won't, she whispered. I can't. Not after everyone saw who he really is. As the adrenaline of the evening began to fade, exhaustion overtook Natalie. She fell asleep, still wearing her wedding dress, curled up on top of the hotel bedspread. I covered her with the spare blanket from the closet and settled into the armchair by the window, keeping watch. Outside, the city continued buzzing with the news, unaware that in this quiet room, my sister was finally free, traumatized, and heartbroken, but free. Finding Natalie at the Parkview Hotel had been just the beginning of what would become the most intense week of our lives. While Natalie slept fitfully that first night, I coordinated with Marcus and Sophia via text, developing a plan to keep her safe and away from both Richard and the growing media frenzy. By morning, the video of Richard slapping Natalie had gone viral nationwide. News vans camped outside the hotel. Reporters approached guests in the lobby seeking information, and Richard's investment firm issued a terse statement about a private family matter that was being misrepresented in the media. He hadn't even apologized publicly. When Natalie woke up, the reality of her situation hit her anew. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her wedding ring with hollow eyes. The hotel's surrounded by reporters, I told her gently. But Marcus found a service entrance we can use. We need to get you somewhere safe. Where would I go? She asked, her voice small. Our apartment is in Richard's name. My clothes, my personal things, everything's there. You can stay with me as long as you need, I offered. Samantha already dropped off some clothes and essentials for you this morning. Natalie looked up, surprised. Your girlfriend brought me clothes? I nodded. She's been worried about you too, even though you've never met. Everyone wants to help, Nat. Getting Natalie out of the hotel proved to be a logistical challenge. Marcus created a diversion at the front entrance, pretending to have information for the reporters, while a sympathetic hotel employee led us through the kitchen to a service elevator that opened onto a back alley. Sophia was waiting there with her car, and we ducked inside quickly, Natalie hiding beneath a blanket in the back seat until we were safely away from downtown. At my apartment, Natalie finally changed out of her wedding dress, carefully folding the expensive gown into a trash bag. I never even liked this dress, she admitted. Richard insisted on it because it photographed well. While Natalie showered, my phone continued to explode with messages. Our parents had called 27 times collectively. Extended family members who had shunned me were now sending supportive texts. Friends of Natalie's reached out, asking for updates and offering help. And most disturbingly, Richard had somehow obtained my work email address and sent multiple messages alternating between threats and pleas to speak with Natalie. When Natalie emerged from the bathroom wearing Samantha's borrowed clothes, she looked both vulnerable and determined. I need to tell you something, she said, about Richard. About everything. We sat at my kitchen table, mugs of untouched tea between us, as Natalie finally unburdened herself of the truth she'd been hiding. The controlling behavior started almost immediately, she began. At first, it was subtle suggestions about my clothes or hair that made me want to please him. Then comments about my friends, how they were holding me back or jealous of our relationship. Before I knew it, I'd lost touch with almost everyone except Sophia, and even that friendship was strained. She described how Richard isolated her from me specifically, knowing I posed the biggest threat to his control. He would twist everything you said or did into an attack on our relationship. After a while, I started to believe it. I thought you were the problem. The financial control came next. Richard convinced Natalie to add him to her bank accounts for convenience, then gradually took over managing all their money. He gave her an allowance, monitored her spending, and required receipts for purchases. When she quit her veterinary job at his urging, she became completely financially dependent on him. The first time he hit me, she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper, was after I ran into an old male friend from college and accepted his business card. Richard found it in my purse and accused me of cheating. When I laughed at how ridiculous that was, he slapped me across the face. I flinched at the image, my hands clenching into fists under the table. He apologized immediately, Natalie said. Cried, brought me flowers, promised it would never happen again. But it did. When I threatened to leave 2 months ago, he showed me folders of information he had on everyone in our family. Dirt on Dad's business practices. Medical information about Mom he'd somehow obtained. Even things about you. He has a friend in the police department who gave him access to records. He said he'd destroy our whole family if I left him. My blood ran cold. That's why you went through with the wedding? To protect us? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I thought I could handle it. I thought once we were married, things would get better. He promised they would. Natalie, I said carefully, we need to go to the police. What he's doing isn't just abuse, it's blackmail and likely other crimes. To my surprise, Natalie straightened her shoulders. I know. That's why I asked Sophia to bring me this. She reached into the bag of belongings Sophia had delivered and pulled out a small external hard drive. I've been collecting evidence for months. Recordings of his threats, photos of bruises, screenshots of controlling texts, financial records showing how he's been moving my money into accounts I can't access. I was too afraid to use it before. But now the whole world saw who he really is. I finished for her. She nodded. I'm ready to fight back. Over the next 2 days, we assembled a team to help Natalie reclaim her life. A domestic violence advocate helped us obtain an emergency restraining order. A lawyer friend of Daniel's took her case pro bono, shocked by the extent of Richard's abuse and financial control. I hired a security consultant to sweep my apartment for surveillance devices and strengthen our digital security after Richard attempted to hack Natalie's email. While Natalie worked with the professionals, I dealt with our family. Our parents were desperate to see Natalie, but she wasn't ready. Instead, I invited them to my apartment while she was meeting with her lawyer. They looked shell-shocked when they arrived, Mom with puffy eyes from crying, Dad with a haggard expression I'd never seen before. Before they could speak, I placed Natalie's external hard drive on the coffee table. Before you say anything, you need to see what your future son-in-law has been doing to your daughter for the past 2 years. For the next hour, they sat in horrified silence as I showed them selected evidence from Natalie's collection bruise photos, time-stamped months before the wedding, recordings of Richard's threats, financial documents showing how he'd systematically taken control of her assets. Why didn't she tell us? Mom whispered, tears streaming down her face. She tried, I said bluntly. Not with words, maybe, but with actions. Every time she pulled away, lost weight, changed her behavior. Every time she flinched when he entered a room. I tried to tell you. But you all chose to believe the charming, successful facade. Richard presented. Dad looked physically ill. We pushed her right into his hands. All those times we pressured her to make the relationship work, to appreciate how lucky she was. She doesn't blame you, I said, softening slightly at their genuine remorse. Richard is a master manipulator. He fooled a lot of people. But what Natalie needs now isn't guilt, it's support. Real support. On her terms. They nodded, humbled in a way I'd never seen before. Whatever she needs, Mom said. Just tell us how to help. Give her space, I advised. Let her come to you when she's ready. And when she does, just listen. Don't make excuses. Don't question her decisions. Just listen. As they left, Dad paused at the door. You were right all along, son. I'm sorry we didn't believe you. The apology couldn't erase 2 years of pain, but it was a start. 3 days after the wedding that wasn't, Natalie was ready to go public with her story. With her lawyer's guidance, she gave a single interview to a respected journalist known for covering domestic violence issues. The article detailed Richard's pattern of abuse, alongside expert commentary about how abusers operate and why victims often stay. She included selected pieces of evidence, enough to make her case without compromising potential legal proceedings. The response was overwhelming. Richard's carefully constructed public image crumbled as business associates distanced themselves, his firm's stock price plummeted, and former employees came forward with stories of his volatile behavior in the workplace. The police opened an investigation based on the evidence Natalie provided, and 2 other women contacted her lawyer with similar stories of abuse by Richard, though they weren't ready to go public. A week after the disastrous wedding, Richard was arrested on charges of domestic violence, coercion, and financial fraud. Released on bail, he violated the restraining order by attempting to approach Natalie outside my apartment building, resulting in his bail being revoked. Watching from the window as police led him away, Natalie stood straighter than I'd seen in years. It's really over, she said, more to herself than to me. He can't control me anymore. That evening, as news of Richard's arrest spread through the family, Natalie made a decision that surprised me. I want to see Mom and Dad, she said. Not alone, though. Will you be there with me? Of course, I promised. Whatever you need. The family reunion that followed was painful but necessary tears and apologies, difficult truths and promises to do better. Through it all, Natalie spoke with a clarity and confidence that had been absent for years. She set boundaries about what support she needed, forgave our parents for their blindness, but made it clear that her healing would be on her own terms. As we drove home afterward, Natalie reached over and squeezed my hand. Thank you for never giving up on me, even when I pushed you away. That's what brothers do, I told her. We're stubborn that way. For the first time since before the wedding, Natalie smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. I'm going to be okay, she said. And for the first time, I fully believed it. 6 months after what the family now referred to as the incident, we gathered at our parents' house for Sunday dinner. These weekly meals had become a ritual of healing. Sometimes awkward, sometimes emotional, but increasingly comfortable, as new patterns replaced old tensions. Natalie sat at the table, looking healthier than she had in years. She had regained the weight Richard had pressured her to lose, returned to wearing the colorful clothes that expressed her personality, and recently accepted a position at a new veterinary practice that would sponsor her application to veterinary school the following year. The legal proceedings against Richard were ongoing, but his power over our family had been shattered. With the help of her lawyer, Natalie had recovered most of her financial assets and received a protection order that would last for 5 years. 2 other women had formally filed charges, creating a pattern of behavior that strengthened the prosecution's case. The conversation around the dinner table that night turned, inevitably, to the changes in our family dynamic since the incident. I still can't believe we were all so blind, Mom said, serving herself another helping of mashed potatoes. When I think about how we treated you, Jerome, when you were just trying to protect Natalie, we should have listened, Dad agreed. We were so dazzled by Richard's money and status that we ignored all the warning signs. I had forgiven my parents weeks ago, understanding that Richard had manipulated them too, but Natalie still struggled sometimes with resentment. "You didn't want to see it," she said quietly. It was easier to believe I was happy than to ask the hard questions. Everyone did that. Not just you two. An uncomfortable silence fell until Marcus, who had become a regular at family dinners, spoke up. "I think we all learned something about what real love looks like," he said. "It's not about fancy weddings or status. It's about caring enough to speak up, even when it's difficult." Natalie reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Some people showed me what love isn't," she said, "and others showed me what it truly is." After dinner, Natalie and I took a walk around the neighborhood, a habit we'd developed during her recovery. The evening air was crisp, trees beginning to show their autumn colors. "I had my final therapy session yesterday," she told me as we walked. "Not that I'm cured or anything, but Dr. Lisa thinks I'm ready to move forward with monthly check-ins instead of weekly sessions." "That's great, Nat. I'm proud of you. It's been hard work," she admitted. "Learning to trust my own perceptions again after years of having them undermined. Understanding why I was vulnerable to someone like Richard in the first place." "What did you discover?" I asked. She considered the question. "I think I was looking for security after Mom and Dad's divorce shook my faith in relationships. Richard seemed so confident, so sure of everything, that I mistook control for strength. I thought if I just followed his lead, I'd be safe from ever feeling that kind of uncertainty again. And now? Now I understand that real security doesn't come from someone else making all your decisions. It comes from knowing you can weather uncertainty and still be okay." We walked in companionable silence for a while, before Natalie spoke again. "You know what still bothers me sometimes? That it took such a public humiliation for me to finally leave. If he hadn't slapped me in front of 300 people, if it hadn't been caught on video and gone viral, I might still be with him. But you were already collecting evidence," I reminded her. "You were preparing to leave even before the wedding." "Yes, but I'm not sure I would have been brave enough to use it," she admitted. "The public exposure forced my hand, in a way." "Maybe," I acknowledged. "But you're the one who had the courage to speak publicly afterward, to press charges, to reclaim your life. No one did that for you." When we returned to our parents' house, Samantha had arrived to pick me up. She and Natalie had become close over the past months, bonding over their shared interest in animal rescue. Watching them chat easily on the front porch, I felt a profound sense of gratitude that something good had emerged from such a painful chapter. Later that night, in the quiet of my apartment, I reflected on everything that had happened since that fateful wedding day. The family that had once shunned me for questioning Richard now understood the importance of uncomfortable truths. The sister who had been isolated and controlled was reclaiming her independence day by day, and I had learned difficult lessons about when to push and when to step back, about the fine line between protection and respect for autonomy. The healing wasn't complete for Natalie or for our family. There were still difficult days when Natalie would be triggered by something seemingly minor, when the legal proceedings would force her to relive traumatic memories, when old family dynamics would threaten to resurface in moments of stress. But we were moving forward together, more honest with each other than we had been in years. Perhaps the most profound lesson came from understanding that love sometimes requires standing alone, speaking truths others aren't ready to hear. In trying to protect Natalie, I had risked my relationship with her and with our entire family. There were moments I questioned myself, wondered if I was overstepping, projecting my own issues onto her relationship. But ultimately, love meant being willing to be disliked, even hated, in the short term for the sake of someone's long-term well-being. Natalie expressed it best when she spoke at a domestic violence awareness event the previous month. Sometimes the people who truly love you are the ones willing to make you uncomfortable, to disrupt the false peace you've created to survive. They're the ones who see your pain when you're working hardest to hide it. In the end, the family that had once told me to stay away from Natalie's wedding had come to understand a fundamental truth that sometimes true love means speaking up, even when every voice around you is saying to stay silent. Sometimes it means being the one person willing to say, "This isn't right," even when it costs you dearly. As for Natalie and me, our relationship had been transformed through fire. The bond that Richard tried so hard to break had ultimately grown stronger. We had seen each other at our most vulnerable and remained standing together. Sometimes, to truly love someone, you have to be willing to become the person they hate most in that moment. But if that love is genuine enough, they'll understand eventually and come back to you. Natalie had come back, and we would never be apart again. What about you? Have you ever had to stand alone to protect someone you love, even when they didn't want your protection? Have you had to make the difficult choice between speaking up and keeping the peace? Share your experiences in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone is simply to see them clearly, even when they can't see themselves.